Hello? Welcome to Wicked Wednesdays. This is episode 7 in our 9-episode Halloween podcast. Getting pretty close to Halloween here. Pretty excited for our final episode, but we've got this one and one more before that one. If you guys like it, please like and subscribe below if you haven't already. It'll really help us out. And today's episode, a little creepy, so viewer discretion is advised. As are all of them, I think we've decided at this point. That being said, today's episode is called The Landlord. Let's get started. It started with the banging noises in the basement. It was right under my apartment, and my neighbors had heard it too. Once a month, on the last day of the month, at about midnight, several loud bangs could be heard in the depths of the apartment building's lowest floor. Several of us complained to the landlord about it, but he had said it was just the water heaters doing their thing, so not much else came of it. Didn't make it any less creepy, though. The apartment building I live in is old and falling apart, but in this economy, it's all I can afford, sadly. The walls creak, the lights flicker, and there's an overwhelming smell of something damp. But I check for mold weekly, and I've never found anything. I used to have a roommate, and that made it a little less gloomy around here, but they just moved out in October, so I was left to face the winter alone. Across the street from the apartments is a park with a beautiful fish pond, and little walking trails all around the area. It used to be a really popular spot for families, to have picnics and things of that nature, but since what happened last year, it's been a little more desolate than normal. See, what happened is there were 3 kids playing in the shallow end of the pond, which wasn't unusual for that time of year, but one of them stepped on something that scared them, and they started crying and screaming. It drew the attention of a police officer nearby, and when he walked over to investigate, he found the dead body of a woman, frozen, in a block of ice. Now, aside from the strange morbidity of that in and of itself, it was the middle of July, and somehow this woman was frozen in a block of ice. She hadn't drowned and floated to the surface. No, this was obviously a murder. Someone had kept her frozen somehow, and upon further investigation, they dug the pond, and indeed, they found an old deep freezer on the bottom of the pond. It had the number 4 painted on the outside of the open lid. Somehow, it had come open, so the woman inside had floated to the surface. If you ask me, it's probably from the gas buildup in her body, combined with the warm weather we'd had. I'm not sure who did it. But if I had done it, I certainly wouldn't have disposed of her there. But then again, I'm a pretty smart cookie, and whoever killed that woman certainly had at least 1 or more screws loose. The families who frequented the park quit letting their children play in the area, and the park has started getting overgrown now that it's not as maintained as it used to be, which doesn't help the overall vibe of the area in any way. And in addition to that, many of the people who lived in my apartment building have moved out of the area, entirely worried that the killer was never found and could still be at large. I understand that, but I'm not afraid of some random person killing me over nothing. Most people are killed by someone they know pretty well, according to the crime documentaries I've seen, and I've never done anything to make someone that angry, so I'll take my chances. Even if someone did try and kill me, I could probably get away. I'm a pretty smart cookie. That being said, recently something happened that really did creep me out. The loud banging sounds in the basement started to sound closer to me than they normally did. I'd put up with this nonsense at least once a month for the last 2 years since I first moved in, and I had finally had enough of it. The following evening, as I saw the landlord walking out to his car from my window, I ran outside to have a word with him. I explained to him that the banging noises were right under my apartment now, and that I was worried it might be a water pipe getting ready to burst. He brushed it off almost entirely, but after some severe insistence on my end, he agreed to have his brother, who was apparently a plumber, check it out the following morning. At the time, that was enough for me, and I returned to my apartment not thinking twice about it. The plumber came and assured me everything was fine the next day, and satisfied with that, I forgot about it until the next month. The following month, right on schedule, the same banging noises persisted, again, right under my apartment. This time, what made it worse is it seemed to be right under my bedroom floor, and there was no way I was going to be able to sleep until I knew it wasn't something bad. I walked down the hallway to the stairs and found the door that led down into the basement. There was a padlock on the door, but that wouldn't stop me. Like I said, I'm a pretty smart cookie. And it just so happens that my siblings and I decided to learn how to pick locks when we were younger to impress our friends. I went back to my apartment and got a few things I knew would work, then came back to the basement door and popped the lock off like it had never been there in the first place. I walked pretty comfortably into the basement and saw a bunch of storage boxes as well as a ladder and some old tools sitting in the corner. I walked around using the flashlight on my cell phone to see where I was going, and I tried to figure out where exactly the banging was coming from, but it had stopped, so I was having a little bit of trouble. There was a back room with a large plastic curtain, like you'd see in an old meat shop, and I walked back over there to see if I was any closer to where I thought the banging was coming from. I stepped through the curtain and suddenly got a huge chill down my back. It must have been 30 degrees in the back room. I shined my light around and saw a peculiar scene in front of me. There were 3 large deep freezers pushed against the back wall of the room. Each had another padlock on it, as well as a number painted on the lid. The numbers were 1, 2, and 3. I felt like I was in a movie, and like something was going to jump out at me, but nothing ever did. Silly, right? I decided I would deal with the banging noises and return to my room. It had stopped after all, and I wasn't finding any clues to what it could have been. I did see, however, as I turned to leave the room, a spot on the floor that wasn't covered in dust like the rest of it. It was right beside a large water heater, and about the size of one of the other deep freezers, but nothing else was there. I walked past the spot, stepped out from behind the curtain, when suddenly I heard the banging noise again. It was coming from the room behind me. It was louder than I'd noticed before, but probably because I was so close to the source. You know, whatever that may have been. I wouldn't know. I returned to my room after hearing it. After all, it was probably just the water heater. And if I couldn't figure out what it was, then I doubt anyone will. After all, I'm a pretty smart cookie.